Fridays are awesome, just like today's edition of CNN Student News. Thank you for joining us as we wrap up the week. I'm Carl Azus. First up, President Obama offers a preview of his administration's first federal budget. If you've ever planned out your own spending and saving, this is similar except with a lot more zeros. President Obama says the proposed budget will help cut down the country's deficit, which could reach $1.7 trillion by October. But some lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, say the budget is just full of wasteful spending. Samantha Hayes breaks it down for us.
It's President Obama's blueprint for America's fiscal future at a time when economic crisis requires compromise.
We will, each and every one of us, have to compromise on certain things we care about, but which we simply cannot afford right now.
The first budget request of the Obama administration, over $3.5 trillion for items like a $634 billion reserve fund to overhaul the nation's healthcare system.
It's a step that will not only make families healthier and companies more competitive, but over the long term, it will also help us bring down our deficit.
Other major items, over $200 billion for U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and cuts aimed at slicing a record federal deficit in half by 2013.
All told, there's $2 trillion in deficit reduction contained in this budget, roughly $1 trillion in reduced spending compared to the current policy path that we are on.
President Obama also hopes to generate billions with higher taxes for wealthier Americans. That's among the proposals sparking objection from Republicans.
The American people know that we can't tax and spend our way to prosperity. It's just the formula that it appears the president's budget is relying on.
The plan presented by the White House is just a working outline. A final detailed version will be released in April. For CNN Student News, I'm Samantha Hayes.
A multi-trillion-dollar budget, a $787 billion stimulus package. Some big money being talked about in Washington these days, but what does it all mean for the country's economy? And what does it mean for you? Earlier, I spoke with Poppy Harlow of CNNMoney.com about these measures and the possible impact on your generation. Take a listen. The president has presented his budget. What does that mean?
What that means, Carl, is what we're going to spend as a nation and where we're going to cut, because what we're looking at now is just a record in terms of the deficit. And what that means is how much more we owe than what we have taken in. And what we saw proposed was a budget that's going to do two things, President Obama said: reduce the $1 trillion plus deficit that we currently have and make big investments in the future.
All right, now you mentioned government spending, the stimulus package. We've heard this huge, gigantic figure of $787 billion. What's that all going for?
There are two components to this that I want to talk to you about, broken down into two main categories: spending and also tax cuts. The goal, the White House says, what they can do through this spending is to create or save about 3.5 million jobs in this country. And in terms of the tax cut part of it, in 2009, it's estimated that about 97% of American households are going to see their taxes reduced next year. So that is the goal as well. Take the burden off on the tax end and try to get Americans back to work.
Why should today's students care about it?
Because they're going to need a job. If you're in high school right now, you may already have a job. A lot of kids in high school do. When you go into college, you're definitely going to want a job if you can to help pay for that. But also, you have to think about your parents. If you don't have a job right now, and even if you do, you rely on your parents for a lot of money.
We've talked about the stock market as an indicator of how the economy is doing. And when the stimulus was signed and shortly afterward, we saw it plummet. Since then, it's jumped back up. It's been all over the map. Why is that if the stimulus is meant to stabilize the economy?
The best answer I have for it is that people really act on how they're feeling. Consumer confidence in this country right now is at a record low. You've seen some big companies collapse. You've seen some big, well-known banks get sold at fire sale prices. You've seen a lot of things happen in the past year that you may not have expected, and that scares a lot of people. And people really do act on those emotions sometimes more than they act on statistics, if you will.
We've had some students getting pretty emotional on our blog, and we also carried a soundbite from John McCain when he described the package as generational theft. How could today's students wind up paying for this stimulus package?
Because when you borrow money, you owe it no matter what. And the longer you take to pay it off, the more interest is accrued. So not only are you paying back what you borrowed, but you're paying it back plus interest. The longer you take, the more you owe.
How can today's students, when they enter the workforce, avoid making the mistakes that got us into this economic mess?
If you can't afford something, you just can't afford it. Don't necessarily borrow in order to afford it. It has to do a lot with just living within your means.
Poppy Harlow, anchor of CNNMoney.com, thank you very much for joining us today on CNN Student News.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, you can watch that entire interview on our website. And while you're there, check out the Spotlight section, where you'll find links to more information about the stories in today's show. Free learning activities, one-sheets, our blog, it's all at cnnstudentnews.com. So make us your homepage and have all these resources just a click away.
Today's shout out goes out to Mr. Scullerood's U.S. History classes at North Junior High School in St. Cloud, Minnesota. What is the approximate distance between New York City and Johannesburg, South Africa? Is it 4,000 miles, 6,000 miles, 8,000 miles, or 10,000 miles? You've got 3 seconds. Go! A trip from New York to Johannesburg covers about 8,000 miles. That's your answer, and that's your shout out.
A group of students about the same age as you recently made that trip, and nearly all of them say it changed their lives. They took part in a service program, one designed to help them change their own community by giving them a glimpse of life in a poverty-stricken part of South Africa. Soledad O'Brien details their journey.
Hi. It took interviews,
It will make me change my life.
essays, recommendations, and 18 hours.
Listen to your mentor and stay together.
To get these 30 kids from Bushwick, Brooklyn, 8,000 miles to Johannesburg, South Africa. Bushwick is a poor community, and many of these children are on the receiving end of government aid.
Her passport.
But on this trip, they'll be givers, volunteering in South Africa's shanty towns, where every single person lives in crushing poverty.
Do you need stuff for school?
I need stuff for school.
Yeah, you need your stationery, you need your books.
Home is a tin shack. The toilet's at the end of an alley. There's no money for school. The program is called Journey for Change, and its purpose is to give kids from a troubled community plagued by crime and drugs and dropouts confidence, hope, and opportunity.
I thought by bringing these kids here and seeing what real poverty is, and also seeing kids who are dying to go to school, dying to learn, that they would then take advantage of not only the blessings that they have in the U.S., but then use those blessings to continue to serve.
Malak Compton Rock is a tireless advocate and fundraiser for these children.
Oh, you did a wonderful job. Can you take these out? I'm proud of you.
In South Africa, they meet children who lack everything: food, parents, and something many of the Bushwick kids don't take advantage of: free school. And they experience a culture they never dreamed of. How will it change them?
That is crazy.
And will those changes last?
Great story there. Now, before we go today, a gutsy grandmother serves up some home-cooked justice.
And I whacked him. And he came up and looked at me like, "Lady, why did you do that?" And I hit him again.
She hit him again! You thought your grandma was tough. This 70-year-old used her frying pan to fight off 4 would-be robbers. They fled pretty fast when she creamed one with her cookware, and they were arrested after making off with just $10. So we guess that whole robbery idea really didn't pan out. I hope you have a good weekend. For CNN Student News, I'm Carl Azuz.